Welcome to Concussion Fix Minisodes. These bite-sized clips are taken directly from our full podcast episodes to give you direct answers to your specific questions about persistent concussion symptoms and recovery. Short, clear, and packed with value. Now remember that these clips are not medical advice and you should always speak with your healthcare provider before attempting anything you hear on this channel. Let's go.
Hello. Thanks for taking my question. I'm trying to figure out. I have run into some issues with like a block almost to continuing into the next section of the program. I think it's because I have all these various health issues going on, but recently I had an allergic reaction to an infusion, which wasn't related to, I don't think, related to the concussion, unless concussions can, trigger you into osteoporosis. But right after, I got a call from my sister, and it's almost like I went right into a trauma response because it was 11 p.m. and I thought something had happened to my mom, and I could feel it. And I just wondered if being in that high state of alert could like set you back where it's like I'm trying to get myself out of it again. Some of it is the emotional part of it, but then I'm also like yesterday I got, in a fight or something with, just argument, stupid stuff. We had another death in the family that isn't someone that's really that great of a guy, but it triggered all of us. And so after the argument, I proceeded to like eat almost like a whole snack bag of Reese's peanut butter cups. And I'm like, okay, like this isn't good. I shouldn't be doing this. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Um, when we have something that sends our nervous system into imbalance, so like a negative reaction to medication, then we're sort of just more likely to experience emotional dysregulation too. It's just kind of part of that picture. That could be anything, like you mentioned, right? Whether that's emotional eating or feeling a little bit more irritable or feeling, anxious or low, being more hypervigilant if you get a late night phone call, that's all part of it. So I think sometimes when we have a bad experience, whether that's, a medication reaction or whether it's just part of the PCS picture, you might just want to remind yourself of, well, if my nervous system is out of balance right now, what are the things I can do to support grounding and stabilization of my nervous system? Because that's going to help everything else. It's sort of like a domino effect. So if we are just trying to move on as is, and we're feeling that heightened awareness of a lot of things, it's more likely we'll be more emotionally dysregulated or experience more irritability or things like you're sharing with us. And it might just be an invitation to double down on some of the grounding and stabilization pieces to really help support your nervous system after something that happened that was out of your control, that was overwhelming for you, as you had shared with us last live with this medication reaction.
right, right. And the yeah, so I guess when you are saying the grounding and stabilization, is there a specific uh practice within your module that you recommend over another? I have done, I really love the Tai Chi. I know that's not really grounding, but I do
Yes.
connect with that in the yoga.
Mhm.
I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, there's different ways that you can sort of engage with some of the exercises. Some of them, one that's really brief, and typically when we're feeling really dysregulated after something happened, moving into sort of brief practices. So there's one called the 3-minute breathing space. That's a recorded guided meditation in the mindfulness section you can try. There's also lives we did on somatics, grounding, and I think it's, oh, Nikki's already on it, grounding for anxiety and overwhelm. There's a presentation there, grounding to meditation, and what practices to use when. So that's all described in those 2 lives. So maybe revisiting those seminars that I did in 2024 and seeing whether something resonates. But generally speaking, starting with brief practices that you do consistently throughout the day versus longer practices. So if 5 minutes feels too long, stick with brief practices. There's also really simple grounding ones that I did in the somatics module that Nikki's already got in there too, which was part 1, November 9th, 2023, and part 2, February 8th, 2024, where it's just really gentle, slow movements where you're engaging parts of the body to signal to the nervous system and activate the vagus nerve and signal to the nervous system that you're safe. So that's where I would invite you to start. And for anyone who's feeling really on edge or something feels really dysregulated in your system, you're outside your window of tolerance, that's when we want to bring things back to the basics of simple grounding that are short in nature and that you do consistently throughout the day. If we're trying to sit and do a meditation practice, it just might feel too overwhelming in the moment. There's too much going on in the body. So focusing on grounding, focusing on nervous system regulation, using brief practices. So that would be my recommendation right now, and see how it goes.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that sounds good. And there was something else that I thought of while you were saying that. Um, one of the things that I didn't do yesterday when I was in the midst of having too many of those peanut butter cups is my dietitian suggested to chew on a ground clove, a whole clove, that will kind of be a way out of it. And I've also been using, I think someone mentioned the bee pollen. There was a spray I think I got at Whole Foods or somewhere that had the bee pollen and peppermint oil in it. And I find that that helps me get like a little sweet, even though it's really not that sweet. I find that to be helpful. So I do know that if um, it's like you get into that exhausted state, so it's you don't really want to cook, and really with all of my issues with food and the sensitivities I got after some other things happened, I do find that you know just trying to do simple things like that help a lot. So I'm just trying to get over that hump so that I can start up again and get back to where I need to be.
Yeah, I can't speak to those supplements or ways of sort of supporting you when you do have those cravings. I don't know, Dr. Paul, do you know anything about like the clove or bee pollen as helping to maybe satiate or?
Yeah, so the
Um,
bee pollen we already talked about, which has the B vitamins, and B vitamins can help with cravings. So that's one kind of their added benefit, especially if they're low. But that's not it. It sounds like very much to me like when there's an elevated stress response, the body's feeling and perceiving to be in pain. We want to balance that with the pleasure centers in our brain. So that's kind of a way that we self-medicate. And so that is working on the dopamine pathway. So whenever we do something like we put something pleasurable in our mouth when we know it's going to taste good, while it does fuel us, it does contain the sugar, and that has its own effects. In most cases, not so good for us. There also is the neurotransmitter effect of eating that, where it like, momentarily makes us feel good. But the more that we jump on the teeter totter of the pleasure pathway, the more that our body becomes desensitized to that, and it upregulates the pain pathway once the pleasure pathway goes down. So we always have to keep jumping on that teeter totter, so to speak. And so that's where a lot of emotional eating comes in. That rebalances after about 2 weeks of avoiding those things. So while it's initially, especially when people have like sugar addiction and emotional eating, once we break free of that, the body eventually will stop asking for it if we stop giving it to it. And so that's just rebalancing neurotransmitters. But the clove piece, that I've never heard of before, and there's a lot of beneficial effects of using clove essential oil short term as an antimicrobial. Never heard it from that perspective. So, I mean, maybe Nikki has some insight on clove from a nervous system perspective. I know you've probably been dying to answer this.
I actually, when you mentioned it, I was like, yeah, that actually would work. Same
Yeah, I
thing with
told you.
even just like holding a brush, like those old brushes, and that pain receptor is just a shock to your system. That's really what the clove would do. Is really right? Clove is spicy, it's strong, it's warming.
And
So
especially, yeah, it's like, and it took a while for it to almost be like where it tasted good, because I love cloves, but with the whole clove, there's all that bitter in there and everything, and I just have to. Maybe I need to have the bottle in my pocket.
because yeah, it is.
Not that I'm
It's
that bad, but obviously I was yesterday. And the other question I have is related to ADHD. So my psychiatrist has told me that um, he thinks that I have like the the PTS or PCS, whatever you call it, has induced like an ADHD in adulthood for me. So he has me on modafinil, and for a lot of different reasons, I would just prefer to get off of it. He's looking into whether I could take something else, but what I wondered is there's something else like in a more natural um, pathway as far as supplements, because I do seem to respond well to like rhodiola and ashwagandha. It's like, is there something I could potentially try as I go off of the modafinil that might be similar or help me, even if it's just, that you tell me to I have to do exercise, or is there a different supplement that I could try? I'm just curious about that. You know, um, what you have to say about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you a specific prescription here, but I can give you general kind of direction here because there is some evidence on, as you mentioned, rhodiola. There's also some evidence on an amino acid called L-theanine, which we talk about extensively in the course from kind of a calming, anti-anxiety, and sleep supportive perspective. That's L-theanine. And then anything that's going to improve dopamine. And again, there's that dopamine showing up where you're feeling kind of like dysregulated on that kind of pain pleasure pathway, getting more cravings. Well, anything we can do to support dopamine. And there's an amino acid called L-tyrosine. But honestly, whenever we're starting to tinker with neurochemistry, my strong recommendation is you got to work with a naturopath on this front because there's so many things that you need to put those guardrails in place. So many things that you can actually take, which may not be, well, good on paper, may not be good for you particularly. I'm just giving you kind of like my top three that I think has some evidence on supporting dopamine function. But I really strongly recommend you work with someone to address that because it's a symphony of neurochemistry in your brain. It's not just, hey, I just got to pump myself full of dopamine and that's the solution. That's not going to work out well for most of the patients that I've seen. And you really need a broad spectrum approach. And ultimately, and I know Melinda's nodding to this, she knows what I'm going to say here. This is still a band-aid solution. We still have to work on balancing that neurochemistry the old-fashioned way and self-regulate. That's one thing I think I've really learned from Melinda is that while we can use tools to induce some of that neurofeedback, biofeedback, and ultimately we want to do it ourselves though. And this is still, I like the word supplement because it actually describes it. It's meant to supplement us in our lifestyle. So you mentioned exercise, really good evidence on exercise and ADHD. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, Melinda, but I think hopefully that gives you some direction here.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's just the theme of today is just remembering that even though there's all of these supplements and supports out there to help with the symptoms, we want to always come back to the foundation and reminding ourselves of how to build that strong foundation, whether that is with some of the psychological reflections, or whether that's through reminding yourself about regulating your nervous system. These are usually common threads for individuals with PCS
Mm-hmm.
because concussion is dysregulating for our nervous system. And
Mm-hmm.
specifically for persistent concussion symptoms, it's almost certain that we have some kind of nervous system dysregulation or underlying dysfunction in those five systems we talk about. So Not forgetting that foundational component when turning to supplements and things that can help, but remembering that they are supplemental, just as Paul said.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, I've been working on upping my exercise. The one thing that I haven't really delved into that I need to is to get where I'm doing, like, even if it's just 5 minutes on my elliptical machine a few times a day, and then upping it from there. It's just, maybe that would help me in the morning, and then, in the mid afternoon when I start to get that dip, and then obviously eating better. Luckily, I haven't had a lot. Like, that was kind of an unusual because I've been trying to lose some of my weight again. So it was kind of a blip yesterday, whereas it's not been, regular. But I do know it's something that it is. It's like an automatic response that I'm not.
Mm.
I need to stop. I can't. Just keep getting up, and it's not healthy, obviously. No one
Yeah,
needs that.
that might be where that self-compassion comes in, right? We all have ebbs and flows in our health and feeling. We all have unhelpful habits that come up from time to time, particularly during stressful periods. So maybe just bringing in that self-compassion for what you're going through and all the things that you've been facing right now. And then when you're feeling a little bit better, returning back to the things that are helpful. And, just even if it's just some brief walking or some of the grounding we talked about, just trying to help stabilize your system and support you on that journey, getting back to, your new baseline that you've been finding over the last couple years. Thanks for your question.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this Concussion Fix Minisode. If you want to learn more about the causes of persistent concussion symptoms and how to fix them, join one of our upcoming free 90-minute patient webinars. Details and sign-up links are in the description. You'll see that with the right approach, recovery is possible. See you there.